this parcel was acquired after this parcel was built. So there will be no issue in terms of building or anything in there. Just we want to stabilize it, make sure that we don't lose the entire thing over the next decade.
That's right, in my opinion, it's unbuildable, this parcel. That issue here.
Seth, we've never seen a lot of these plants used in coastal situations. Big blue stem, switchgrass, little blue stem, lovegrass. They will hold up.
They will. I apologize about the big blue stem because we've had conversations about that, and I know you have a very small population of potentially native blue stem, big blue stem on the island, and I remember past conversations about not wanting to potentially contaminate the genetic diversity of that. So be happy to remove that, but we have actually had very good luck with these species, these native species on coastal banks. Most of the species we have are from local genotypes, and so they have a natural salt tolerance. And the same sort of principles of these species being deep fibrous roots that colonize very quickly and build up the great soils of the Great Plains. That's where they migrated from before they arrived on the eastern seaboard. And if you look into a lot of healthy coastal banks that haven't been compromised, you will find those species. Even species like the Spartina patens, which is not an obligate salt marsh species, will often be found growing, on a coastal bank community, not in the same abundance that it would in a salt marsh, and that's not supposed to be, mixed in with some of the other species. So, but the plugs which are proposed, American beachgrass, little blue stem, purple lovegrass, seaside goldenrod, and switchgrass, all have nice salt tolerances and very fibrous, deep rooting systems that have proven to be very effective. And why I say that is I'm thinking of some projects we have on the Cape that, with the high storm surge we had this winter, the waves or the wave energy extended, the rack line extended well above the upper fiber roll arrays, so areas that weren't held together with anything but plants at the age that these were at. There had originally been a biodegradable blanket which had broken down, and all that was left was plants. So you had the waves crashing into the and dissipating in the fiber roll array, but then the run-up would be 4 or 5 feet above that. So there's still energy in wave run-up, and it was like not even a blade of grass out of place because the roots of these plants had been established for 3 or 4 years at that point, and they were really colonizing all of that sand and holding it together. So the sand nourishment washed away, which was over the fiber rolls, obviously, with that kind of energy, but the plants held the other areas in check, and then this spring we recovered it. So we sort of found that balance between protecting the sediment contribution, sediment source, and protecting the stability of the landfill.
I have one more question, I guess, about how much compost do you think you'd be adding? Because normally that would be an input to the harbor area that we wouldn't want.
It's just around the little 2-inch plugs, so it's probably 2 ounces per plug, something of that, a very small. I mean, it'd be comparable to the growing medium that like a container plant, like a native rose or bayberry or beach plum is grown in.
Just an initial.
It's just, it's not an application over the surface. It's just right in the root zone, just to make it a little bit more of a healthy growing environment for the plugs. It's just a one-time initial application, and that actually happens at the nursery. By the time the fiber rolls arrive on site, that's all either being digested by the plants or certainly colonized by the roots. The roots of some plants, with the beachgrass in particular, as I said earlier, they tolerate growing in fiber rolls. We've seen a stolon from beachgrass pass through 3 adjacent fiber rolls because you stack them all together and plant them, and we found it's like you're sliding the fiber rolls apart and you're finding these long stolons because it's looking for mineral soil. Provided you can keep it sort of moist and growing initially, and that's what we do at the nursery. So that introduction of the compost would be sort of a distant memory by the time of construction. That's a good point.
So, I don't think I fully understand. Do the plugs come pre-inserted into the rolls, into the fibers themselves that are then filled with sand on site? Or do they come from off-site, fully formed?
Okay, so the fiber rolls are a completely coconut fiber product. They're held together with a casing, and then they're built at different densities. The typical fiber roll. So we're talking about standard fiber rolls, either the 7-pound or the 9-pound. On the 7-pound density, the lower density, the plugs are grown separately, and then we at our nursery open up little holes in the fiber rolls, insert the plugs, and grow them for usually a period of 2 months, 3 months to get the roots well colonized in the fiber rolls. Then the fiber rolls with the plants embedded in them are brought to the site and installed with the plant side facing up. That's very important. And then they're anchored in place, and then they're covered with sand.
So how much do they weigh?
They're about 180 pounds, give or take, depending on the density. Higher density ones are a little heavier. Two strong men can lift them with a little bit of effort.
That's density per
Cubic foot, I believe. Yeah.
And so how many plugs will you be using approximately?
Over a project of this size, thousands.
Thousands?
Yeah, hundreds, not too many thousands, but they're at a density of 12 inches, and they're not just, actually we use a little slightly tighter density in the actual fiber rolls. We're only planting the exposed side of them, and they're 18 to 20 inch diameter. But then where the bank extends higher, we're proposing to vegetate to the edge of the disturbed area, so it's fully vegetated, and that's where the additional plants go. So in the actual fiber rolls, it would be hundreds, but the overall project, it would be thousands. I could certainly get you the exact number.
Right, but at 2 ounces per plug, then you're talking quarter of a ton of copper, so.
Let's see, 6.
Well, that would be,
Yeah.
8.
Oh, but yeah, but
That's only in the fiber
only in the
rolls.
fiber rolls. Yeah, only in
Not,
the fiber rolls.
not on the upper end.
Okay.
And that's being done at the time where the plants are inserted in the fiber rolls at the nursery. But over the 2-week period, they begin to grow and they begin to establish and really literally get hold to it, because that becomes a nourishment. And almost like a kid hanging onto a candy, doesn't want to give it away. And by the time it comes in, mostly it's dispensed. And then when we put the sand over it, there is virtually no chance of them to be loose and migrating outside.
Thank you.
Anything else from the commission?
How many, is it 6x6 anchor posts?
They are 4x4, I believe.
Right.
6x6 here and there, that's the middle.
6x6?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Senior
moment.
unpreserved
Yeah.
natural wood.
Natural wood, again, we want to stabilize the toe because that lowest fiber roll is the densest one. And that really establishes our toe, protecting the entire slope. We want to give it opportunity for the vegetation to completely grow, penetrate through into the sublayers, and once create that wood naturally is going to decay or we can take it out.
Because I would think that would act as a hard surface a little bit if the water comes up.
Well, they are so small, they
Yeah.
are 5 feet on center.
So far.
When it comes in with a wave action, that's kind of it won't even be material. And 90% of it's in the ground. It's very low wood, it's being penetrated. It's only coming in to really hold that first row and then really anchor that toe, so we won't get any sliding.
So this might be for Kevin. There's no structure on this lot, so I think one of the questions the commission's going to have to answer is, does this assemblage of materials constitute a coastal engineering structure? Which, if we were going to allow a coastal engineering structure, they're only allowable to protect pre-78 structures. What about the structures on the lot behind? Are they older or newer structures? Or we should like some information on those too, I would think.
The original house on the lot behind, which is at 4 Middle Valley Road, owned by 4 MVR LLC, did predate 1978. The core of that structure is still there, but there are new structures there too that were recently built. But I don't think that this project constitutes a coastal engineering structure, in my opinion. I think that it's a soft solution. And the literature that I've looked at indicates to me that it doesn't fall under the definition of a coastal engineering structure. It is permittable, irrespective of whether or not it protects a pre-78 house.
We reached out to Mass CCM and DEP really to explore what their opinion is. We're not trying to say just that we went the extra mile, and it was very clear from our communication with them. They said 5 layers of fiber rolls, in our opinion, does not constitute the coastal structure, regardless whether the shoreline is habited or not habited, because they recognize the reason we're doing this is that we want to stabilize it and then prevent it from further erosion and again impact on the neighborhood and so on and so forth. I've done a lot of these projects in the mainland. I got one under construction right now with DEP, so I constantly communicate with them, talk to them, and things, and just relay the information that we went to them. When we reviewed the comments in the course of answering them, we did extra due diligence in terms of contacting them to get their opinion as well.
We certainly permit and install many of these fiber arrays on the Cape and on Montes Vineyard. I realize this is our first before this board every year, and provided you don't incorporate things like gabion baskets or rock or sheet pile or something like that, which we're not, they've never considered them to be a coastal engineering structure. And the question has come up. Most of the projects we install them at are actually in post-78 status dwellings because it's the only option that they have. And I don't think we would say that this dwelling is currently threatened by, so even if it's pre-78, I don't think it's threatened by the erosion immediately. And that would be one of the tests you'd have to pass to satisfy a coastal engineering structure.
Real quickly, just as a reminder, we have actually seen these rolls before on a project actually nearby, further up towards Pimini's Point. Permitted a little bit smaller, not quite to the same scale. The same solid log rolls, and in that application, we determined that they were not a coastal engineering structure. So, obviously, every project's a little bit different, and this is 5 rolls with posts and plantings and those things. So, that is a determination that you guys are going to have to make at some point, whether it is or whether it isn't. But for some of you guys, it's the first time you've seen them, but for some of you guys, it's not. So,
Okay, anything from the public? Yeah, Ms. McKinnon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Emily McKinnon for the Nantucket Land Council. I just have a few remaining questions and comments after the presentation. I saw, I think, where mean high water was, the elevation of it was indicated on some of the profiles, but I didn't actually see it on the overall plan. There's an existing water line, and I wasn't sure if that was the same as the mean high water. I just thought it would be important or good to have it indicated on the plan where it is in relation to the construction. And maybe it is there, but I just wanted to confirm that. And I also was curious about how the stabilization structure will terminate at the ends, especially on the property where it might abut up against a hard structure, and then also on the other side of the property, if there's a specific way that the ends will terminate to it. And then I guess just as far as the discussion about some regulatory concerns, I haven't seen how large the Spartina patches are. It sounds like they might be pretty small and minimal, but I just would put it out there to you guys to discuss whether or not salt marsh is a resource area that should be included here for consideration. I know in previous harbor properties where there's been Spartina, you have included those performance standards in your evaluation, so I would just put that to the commission to discuss. And then as far as the determination about whether this is a coastal engineering structure, or not. I think it would be interesting to maybe look back at the other application where you've approved it before and see how that structure does compare to this one in size. I can't remember what exactly was on that lot where that stabilization project took place, whether it was a vacant lot or not. I do recall, I know you guys don't see a lot of proposals to stabilize road and coastal banks on vacant lots. The one that I can recall in recent history were the ones adjacent to the Gund property, and that was also a gap lot where there were some vacant properties looking for stabilization. I don't think it was the same proposal, but I think that what was permitted there was a fence with nourishment. So just sort of for some consideration of maybe similar proposals from the past. That's what you've permitted on vacant lots previously for stabilization. And you do have the definition in the local regs for coastal engineering structure that you could also consider. Thank you.
Well, it shows the mean high water level is coming in approximately 12 feet, right, from where you're going to...
Mean high,
Exactly.
exactly. Mean high water is elevation 3.25, and we've identified the coastal beach, which is two contour lines, elevation 3 and elevation 4. So it's fairly defined, and we provided this chart to explain all of the relationship of the mean high water, mean low water, the historic high tide, and the 100-year flood, and so on and so forth. So it's if just you want that further articulated specifically to identify mean high water on the plan, we will be happy to do that.
Well, you've identified it on the cross-section.
Right. In terms of addressing how we want to take care of the ends, of course, the flanks, what we call them, is very important because that's part of encapsulating the slope so it doesn't erode further. We understand there is a small gap. It's kind of the property makes funny turns around this area. We spoke to the neighbor. Our intent is to really bring the fiber rolls and really tuck them into that existing, literally, and secure them, so we don't have a gap that the wave action goes beyond and then begins to undermine the process. It's a little more tricky on the outside because the property does not extend all the way to the existing bulkhead, which I showed you the picture that it's being undermined and eroded. So we have no choice other than to take those fiber rolls and turn them in and then tuck it into the embankment. That's the only way we can do it, and we would hope that's a temporary. At some point, we would have loved the idea for this to continue all the way to really engage the bulkhead at some point, because then it provides complete protection and you don't get undermining on the flanks. We are sure we can take care of this very nicely, but here we have to turn it around because that's the limit of our property. We can't go beyond that.
Anything else from the public or the commission? Well, I think we have some questions we would like to have answered before we proceed with this. So would you like to continue this then?
Sure.
Yes, we would.
For 2 weeks?
July 22nd, if that's convenient, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So unless I hear an objection from the commission, we'll continue this to July 22nd. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay, 42 Union Street, LLC, at 13 Lafayette Street.
Okay, for the record, Don Bracken, Bracken Engineering. This project was continued from the last meeting. Since then, we've went out and got some more information and updated the plans to address some of the questions from the commission, and also to address some of the concerns for one of the neighbors regarding the existing water issues at the site. To recap, this is the site where the old funeral home was located on Union and Fayette Street. Back in December, we received an order of conditions to raise all the buildings on the site, which included the funeral home, which was at the corner, a garage, and a couple of workshops. Also included in that order of conditions was to construct a common driveway as shown on the current plans. We also filed a notice of intent specifically for the corner lot, which is 42, considered 42B, which was issued by the commission a few months ago. This current application, we actually have 3 applications for this same permit tonight. 13 Fayette Street is located here in the middle of the project. Since the last meeting, we went out, we did some soil borings on the site to determine soil conditions and groundwater depth. On this site, at the low area, we found groundwater only at about 6 inches. I also observed the sumps pumping groundwater out from underneath the existing building that's still there from the funeral home. So even as of today, the area is saturated because of that condition. As we discussed at the last meeting, the proposal under new construction to meet floodplain requirements would require us not to have any crawl space or portion of the cellar below grade. Everything will be above grade, so there won't be any permanent dewatering. The other issues that we talked about was the changing of the surface types and whether or not there would be any additional runoff that would contribute to the existing inadequate drainage systems in these areas. We did a hydrology report for each of the lots. And in the report, we demonstrated that under comparing existing conditions to proposed conditions, that there would be a reduction in impervious area. There would also be a reduction in what we call the curve number, or the runoff ratio of the site. Both those factors will result in less runoff, less peak flow, and less volume in total. We were able to achieve that by changing, taking out the paved surfaces, putting impervious driveways. We're also, as you can see on this landscape plan, which we've incorporated into each of the individual site plans, the light green are the lawn areas, the dark green are the hedge areas, and the orange areas are the mulch planted beds. So the hedge areas and the mulch planted beds have a much higher ability to absorb, the precipitation and not result in as much runoff that's occurring on the site today. We're also proposing, that we didn't propose in initial plans, is to raise the grade about 6 inches. Now that we knew we were dealing with a shallow water table, but also again in an effort to try to reduce the runoff from the site. We think if we raise it 6 inches, in some cases we'll have between 12 inches and 24 inches of soil between the finished grade and groundwater. That will allow more area for root systems. It also allow a better zone, a pervious zone, to store the runoff, especially in the pervious driveway, until it can dissipate. And we think overall it's just going to help with the absorption on the site. And I think those are the changes. And if you have any questions on this site, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions from the commission?
I have a question about the plantings, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys thought about putting in like rain gardens and water-loving plants so that they're helping with some of this? If you're raising the grade and then putting in hydrangea, like that sort of thing. I don't know. I think there's ways to help your situation with the planting.
We did tell the Richard Craddock is the landscape designer for this project. We explained the situation to him, and he knows what he's dealing with. We're not specifically, specifying any plant types, but I would assume in the mulch beds, he would make sure that it's water tolerant within that root zone.
Yeah,
That's,
because some could be, help the situation more than just being tolerant. So,
yeah, the objective is definitely to absorb
yeah.
as much water as we can in the situation.
Willow trees, so we'll just suck it dry.
Yeah. They'll block out pipes too, though.
No, there you go. That's good. Any other questions for Don? Or anything from the public? If there's nothing else, Jeff, do we have what we need to close the hearing?
Yes, sir.
Ready to close, Don?
Yes, yes.
I have a motion to close.
Motion close.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I
That-
recuse, or I'm not part of this decision.
Okay. That motion carries with Commissioner Golding recusing. Okay, Union Street Partners 2, 42A Union Street. You got two more of these, Don?
Yes.
That was yours. Oh, that's mine. That's yours.
So this is like ditto?
Same
It's-
size.
Yeah.
Same picture?
Same picture, basically. 42A is this property on the southeast corner of the site. Now that we have a landscape design plan, one of the changes from the previous plan is we're showing a brick paved area for vehicle parking in that location. Otherwise, the limits of the driveway, the structures, and everything else are the same. The other important note, right now there's a wide opening on Union Street that will be blocked off and the sidewalk reconstructed in that area.
Do you calculate your reductions in runoff on this lot as well?
Yes, we do the same thing. Again, reduction in impervious area. That curve number I talked about goes from 88 down to 82. And in the hydrology report, in the conclusion, we have a table that specifies what all the reductions are.
Jeff, can Joe sit on these either?
Yeah, Joe actually was present for
Oh,
all these presentations, so we'll check that out earlier. I just have to give him this form to sign. He is not eligible.
okay, any questions?
I just have the same question about the plantings.
Anything from the public? Oh, sorry. Okay, do we have what we need to close on this one? Do I have a motion to close?
Motion to close. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries with Commissioner Golding recused. Okay, 42 Union Street LLC at 11 Lafayette Street.
This is the smallest of the lots. Basically, it's the same situation. The only difference on this one is we actually do increase the impervious area by about 10 square feet. But again, with the other changes that we're making on the site, we still reduce the runoff coefficient number, and there's a slight decrease in the runoff and the runoff volume. The only other thing I can add that applies to the other projects as well, question was brought up about dewatering. So there will be dewatering for all these projects. I did talk to Sylvia, the town engineer, and I think there was an issue brought up whether or not we could dewater into the town drainage system. He didn't see an issue with being able to dewater as long as we presented him with the details ahead of time, and he approved it.
Any questions?
So this one does have a crawl space?
No, none of them.
None of
Well, I mean, technically it has a crawl space, but the slab of the crawl space would be above grade.
So dewatering just during construction.
just during construction and put the frost wall and footings in. In the soils, we did find some organic soils in the middle, but these soils we found sand, and we found sand on this side as well. They are going to have a geotechnical report done and some official borings done for the foundation design itself prior to applying for a building permit.
Are they doing breakaway panels or smart vents? You know?
I'm not sure yet that they're specified. It would be, I have a feeling it'll probably be smart vents, foundation walls.
Well, if there's no further questions, we have a motion to close the hearing.
Motion to close.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries with Commissioner Golding recused. Thanks, Tom.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, White, 47A West Chester Street.
It's the best plan you ever used.
Versions.
Just remember how to keep one of those when you're.
Absolutely. Brian Madden from LEC Environmental Consultants representing the applicant, Kim White. The June 17th meeting, the application that was before you for proposed additions, front porch, garage, cottage. Some of the feedback we got from the commission that there was a lot of structural increases within the 50-foot buffer zone, and we were asked to basically evaluate that further, as well as the mitigation area that was provided. And the plans before you, just to review some of the revisions that were made. The easterly addition right here was reduced from 472 square feet to 288 square feet. We've eliminated the proposed garage, 480 square foot garage in this location. That's been eliminated. We are proposing to relocate that shed in that same footprint outside the 50-foot buffer zone. We've replaced the wooden deck expansion with a pervious stone patio in this location. And the proposed structure increase within the 50-foot buffer now totals 622 square feet. I've highlighted that in pink on these sketches that are before you. Proposed mitigation measures that we've now are proposing or expanded include we've added a storm tech chamber to collect and treat runoff, roof runoff in this location right here, east of the addition. We are proposing to relocate the existing pervious driveway outside the 25-foot buffer zone where that's feasible. That's west of flags A5 through A8. And we're proposing to increase the buffer zone enhancement area by approximately 1,400 square feet to 1,910 square feet. So that's comprised of two separate areas. One within some existing lawn areas where the former driveway footprint on the west side of the property, that's about 660 square feet, and small pocket up closer towards Westchester, adjacent to, or on the opposite side of the driveway. And that's within existing lawn area currently. The mitigation planting area is now total over 2,700 square feet. And we've isolated out the westerly driveway bump out area that was not previously permitted and not fully restored. That's an area in purple on the sketch, so that hasn't been included as mitigation in any of these numbers. We've kind of separated that out. And just to review, the front porch itself will be on sonotubes elevated. The proposed 288 square foot addition will just be on a small crawl space foundation. And for the proposed structures, we are proposing to meet that 3-to-1 mitigation ratio that was discussed at the meeting. One of the commission members had requested that. Basically, for the square footage increases within the 50-foot, we are significantly expanding upon that mitigation area to slightly greater than 3-to-1 to provide a long-term net benefit to the resource areas, including the relocation of the driveway, which would occur prior to the construction of the cottage up front. And just basically to reiterate, all the proposed work activities, proposed structural work within the 50-foot buffer zone does occur within existing lawn landscaped areas. And we did expand the plant list. As we previously proposed, there's 825 square feet of wetland within the existing lawn area that we're proposing to revegetate. Proposed species include highbush blueberry, winterberry shrubs, as well as individual blue flag and Atlantic Joe Pyeweed plugs. Within the buffer zone enhancement areas, the upland areas, we are proposing a mix of bayberry, inkberry, arrowwood, as well as plugs of common milkweed and butterfly weed. And the planting areas will be monitored for 2 growing seasons to make sure they're successfully established. And only drip line irrigation, if needed, would be utilized to help establishment. So at this point, I'll turn it over to questions.
Any questions for Brian?
Actually, I wasn't able to find I guess I could go back into the last packet, but do you have what was proposed before compared to this?
Yeah.
I do. Take a look at it.
So it extended a lot further out to the east.
But you're still walking the 25-foot line.
Correct. And that's just basically to square off the house.
It helps just to compare from kind of color to color.
Yeah.
There you go.
This was the submission last time. And have they talked about if they flip that around, sort of where this tongue came out here? Does that impact that 50 less? In other words, take the same shape, but
I'm not 100% sure. You're talking run this length along?
right. If you ran that length this way, I
Right.
don't want to redo that project or anything. I'm just saying, have they considered that? It seems like a pretty low-hanging fruit there.
Not exactly. We kind of just try to tuck it close to the zoning setback lines, expecting HGC to weigh in on that as well.
Yeah.
I can't tell you definitively whether or not that would result in any increase or decrease. And it looks pretty close, but maybe a slight decrease. But again, that area is opposite of the driveway with an existing lawn area, and we are proposing to kind of augment the naturally vegetated buffer zone in that area.
I guess my question pertains to the planting that's going in, and just if you've considered having a more diverse group of plugs.
I tried.
Because I know, well, milkweed and butterfly weed are basically the same thing. So, right, it's an asclepias.
Yeah.
Just so you're getting a diverse group back there, because I don't know, it's not fully replicating what a real wetland would look like or a buffer zone. I think that would be a little more sourcing. Yeah. I know, I think it's New England Wetland Plants has great plug assortments where it's like pollinators and you just get a little bit more going on in there.
No, we can augment that certainly. Yeah, one thing that I think came up at the last meeting, didn't end up on the plan, so we'll need to continue anyways, is the proposed pool area outside the 50-foot doesn't have a fence around it. So that detail was raised, and we neglected to add that.
Keep the deer on.
Keep the kids out. Not happen. Stray wandering around children.
Oh, yeah.
They'd have to wander pretty far to get to that one.
Anything from the public? Yes, Sarah.
Sarah Alger, represent the neighbors directly next door at 47 Westchester. I wanted to submit these aerials from 2007, 2011 to 2014, because I think they show how kind of larger expansion of the areas that are intruding into the wetlands over the course of those years. And I felt as if the applicant should be required to bring the property into compliance before coming here and asking for additional structure within the, particularly within the 50. The second thing that I wanted to point out is that this orange area that he's showing here is the proposed buffer zone enhancement area of 250 square feet, is in a, partially at least, in an area that's subject to an easement in favor of my clients. And we don't believe that the applicant has the ability to encumber that easement area with an order of conditions that requires this sort of enhanced buffer area. So I think he's going to have to find, he should find another area for that 250 square feet. And I guess while I'm at it, I'll point out that the proposed pervious parking area is also in our easement area and is not going to be allowed. And I think that really asking for this 480 square foot cottage sort of shoehorned in, it's never going to be built exactly that way. It's going to intrude more into the buffer zone, probably into the 25. And I think we shouldn't allow it at all. I think they're asking for an awful lot on a very wet lot.
Yeah, I briefly did touch base with Sarah on that, and we are taking a look at the parking area within that easement. I haven't read the easement language, whether or not that's a strict prohibition. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it kind of speaks to not preventing access to the neighbor's property. But we can certainly look at revising that and hopefully being in a position to ship that outside the easement altogether.
Well, I think we still end up with that same issue about still, I know, Brian, you're really trying to extend the restoration areas and things, but there's still a lot of structure in the no-build buffer zone.
Yeah, I mean, I guess on that point, we did submit aerials as well, before I get to that, from 1998, as well as 2008, 2009, that's a Mass GIS image, which is probably the first, the latest publicly available or easily available aerial photograph that was in effect prior to the applicants purchasing the property in October 2010. You can kind of see on that one the existing edge of lawn area and then possibly a lone shrub out here. And so I don't think there has been any expansion of lawn area in that area, and I think the driveway conditions, aside from that westerly bump out, are pretty mimic the pre-existing conditions. We recognize that there's 622 square feet of proposed new structure in the 50-foot buffer zone. We've attempted to make great strides to try to help restore and enhance existing conditions. Excluding the wetland planting area and just focusing on the upland area, we've provided 3-to-1 mitigation ratio. I think that goes above and beyond other projects that have been permitted allowing structures in the 50-foot. And I would just say that, again, this is all within existing developed conditions. And in our letter that we submitted, we did go into a little bit more detail on how we feel that doesn't result in an adverse impact to the resource area. We are mitigating that through the installation of the storm tech chamber. We can take a look at some of the points the commission raised today and see what can be done. I just want to relay this. What I've been thinking is, one of the early questions was, can we site the addition outside the 50-foot buffer zone? If we were able to do that, then the mitigation goes away. Allowing some structures in the 50-foot gives the commission some authority to request some significant improvements. And I just think this is an opportunity where we can achieve that on site. And we'll sharpen the pencil a little bit more and add a little bit more detail, but I hope we're not too far off the mark.
And check into those issues that Sarah brought up.
Yes.
I wanted to mention too, I noticed that they changed their driveway surface significantly between 2007 and 2011 and 12. It went from being a pretty simple dirt driveway to being all shell. And I don't know, I think that has an impact. That was all done without any approvals at all.
Yeah, I don't know what the surface used to be. I mean,
It looks pretty dirt.
I mean, here's what it looked like in 1998. That looks pretty gravelly or shelly to me. I don't know.
I think it's dirt.
Well, shell is still
Yeah.
pervious, and it may actually help a little bit.
I mean, I certainly have issues with the cottage down below. And then you add like a parking spot where there's a car leaking things close to the wetland. It's definitely an issue for me.
Yeah, it seems to be pushing the envelope a little bit there.
We can take a look at the configuration of that. I mean, following up what Ben was saying, would sliding it, kind of rotating around so there's maybe less than the 50-foot, kind of moving in the right direction there?
Yeah, definitely.
Would put the driveway on the other side too,
Yeah.
a little further away.
Just-
But I think the easement issues are.
I think as we talk about it, we're getting kind of to the kind of beating around the bigger point is when we're looking at this, obviously it's a project that requires a significant amount of waivers. Both are being requested under, obviously, a net benefit request for mitigation work and plantings, things like relocating the driveway and doing things to increase the setbacks. And the other waiver that's being requested is that there's no adverse impact and no reasonable alternative. So I think as we're talking about these alternatives, I mean, that's part of the analysis you guys need to do is whether or not there clearly is a reasonable alternative to still allow the project to proceed without being, perfectly in compliance. And that's when we're doing that waiver analysis. That's kind of what we're looking for. So if it looks like there's alternatives or you're seeing things, this would be a good time to say, I still think there are alternatives to to this project, whether it's reconfiguring or twisting or moving things to do it, that's the good things to bring up. I mean, just, I think you see a little bit where there was that question last time on the main house with the decks and the addition size and those things where, you know, the applicant has come back with a little bit of response of changing from deck to impervious patio, which is a non-waiver requirement, or shrinking the addition or reconfiguring that. So I think we're doing the analysis necessary. I just don't want to lose track of it where we're nitpicking over 2 square feet here or there.
Yeah,
Figuring it that way.
now that I'm looking at it, that easement buffer right there, up along the cottage, that's right here. So I think flipping it is probably not possible. So we can certainly look at, you know, eliminating or reconfiguring that driveway. You know, I see this area as being somewhat a little bit less invasive because it is on the opposite side of an existing driveway, shared driveway. You know, if you know the neighbor doesn't want us to replant that area, then you know, so be it. I don't think adding plantings outside of that easement is going to provide any long-term net benefit because it would be so isolated away.
I don't know, I think one thing I see still is that you've got a pool in the one buildable spot on this lot, you're putting your swimming pool there, which, you know, maybe they can do without us. I mean, I know this is like sacred ground I'm treading on here, but maybe they could do without a pool and put that cottage back in that corner or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's just really no place to
Oh, they'd have to kind of...
Yeah, for an addition, it's kind of oddly located that corner, that triangular corner, as it relates to the kind of just rectangular house.
Mm-hmm.
But we did take a look at that. Yeah. Now we can see what we can do here.
If there's no further questions, yes. Who is that? I can't see over there. Emily. Oh, Emily, sorry.
Thank
You
you,
just
Mr.
holler
Chairman.
at me or throw something or something.
Emily McKinnon for the Nantucket Land Council. I did have one question that I didn't see specifically addressed in the proposal. I think it was discussed that the addition and the pool would maintain a 2-foot separation to high groundwater, but I wasn't sure what the groundwater was around the proposed cottage. I know this entire neighborhood has a lot of flooding issues, and I just wanted to find out if that was also going to maintain the 2-foot separation. And then, as far as the structures within the 50 and the waivers that are being requested, the reality is just that this is a constrained lot, and the owners obviously purchased it as such. I think it is always important for the commission to consider mitigation that's being proposed when they're looking at these waivers. As Jeff stated, the structural additions are really being requested under the waiver that says no adverse impact and no reasonable alternatives. I think it's important for the commission to be careful when they're considering a trade between restoration and revegetation type of mitigation with structural addition, because as we've seen from these aerials, unfortunately, all of the plantings and restoration can be much more temporary than the structures that end up being very permanent. So as far as trying to weigh new structure within a 50-foot buffer zone with mitigation plantings, that's just another thing to keep in mind as far as balancing those concerns. Thank you.
Brian, would you like to continue?
Please, to the 22nd.
Unless you hear an objection, we'll continue this to the 22nd. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I got a lot of collect on this one.
Okay, so I think if I'm keeping up with myself, that takes us to the town of Nantucket at 15 Harborview Way.
Oh, thanks.
All right, this is one that we had continued from last time, so everybody's also.
Kara Bozanowski, the DPW director, and with me is Larry Kester, the facilities manager. The town has hired LLB architects to do a renovation of the Children's Beach concession facility. Approximately 800 square feet in the existing condition, and what we are adding is bathroom facilities. 4 stall women's and two men's. The addition is approximately 700 square feet, so we're going from 800 to approximately 1,500. The existing concession stand, we'd like to retain the building of, pick it up and rotate it 90 degrees so that it's facing the lawn area, and there's an addition of decking around the existing building and then in between the existing building and the new building. It's entirely on piers. It's being raised above flood elevation. The existing foundation is a bunch of cinder blocks that the building is just propped on top of, so probably be the easiest move ever. But we are in coastal land subject to storm flowage, and we are coming this evening for an order of conditions for the construction of this building. Our most impactful condition would be to pick up and rotate the building. If we have a certain amount of funding, and if the funding is not sufficient, we may end up having to leave the concession stand in its existing configuration and add the restroom facilities to the rear.
So just to be clear too, this is actually also just within the buffer zone to the coastal bank and coastal beach with the bulkhead there. The closest point is about 85 feet away when it's all said and done. So
it's outside the 50 though.
Very much so. But the bulkhead in this case is also that it's the bank itself is that timber bulkhead that separates the beach from the paved pedestrian walkway that's there.
Just one question that comes up is if there's going to be temporary dewatering to pour the footings.
I don't anticipate that. It's a seasonal structure, so it's not going to be. There won't be a foundation underneath that.
Well, just when they're building that, though, they might have to dewater. Just I guess you could ask the DPW for.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if it was substantial.
There's also going on pilings too. We don't always see that as much with. That's usually with the crawl space foundation when we see that dewatering activity. Pilings.
These will be driven. Yeah.
Driven. Oh, okay. Then it won't be a problem.
Yeah. If there's dewatered from that, there's something going on.
Yeah, there's something wrong. Yeah. They start floating during trouble.
We're all in trouble.
They pull the drain plug on the island around the thing.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
Any other questions?
How is it going to hook up to the existing sewer system?
There are existing connections for both water and sewer, and we'll be retaining those.
Okay, if there's no further questions, anything from the public? Yeah, Emily.
Emily Mason of the Nantucket Lane Council. I just wanted to check and make sure that the commission just identifies somewhere in the order of conditions that it is in the resort within the buffer zone to the resource area of the bank and beach as well, because I didn't actually see that on the plans anywhere.
The bulk of the stuff is labeled on the plan, the beach area there. So
It doesn't have the buffers, does it?
So maybe that could just be incorporated in the order, but.
We typically list in our project overview all of the applicable resource areas. But I can happen to tell you that the draft list includes both of those. The buffers.
We don't need to leave it open to.
No, I mean, I identify the resource area that's to scale plan, so we'll helpful.
Do we have what we need to close? You ready to close, Kira?
Yes, please.
Do I have a motion to close? Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Guinness luck.
So So I think we're at 56 Wall Street Trust. Did I miss one?
Kimball.
Oh, Kimball. Okay, Kimball, Sherburne, it's LLC at 9 Kimball Ave. What did I say that was continued?
Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors, representing the applicant and property owner, Kimball Sherburne LLC. This is an existing parcel or developed property at 9 Kimball Avenue, in which there is an existing dwelling constructed in the early 80s. The site is serviced by an on-site septic system. The system was inspected and is a passing system. The property has transferred within the last year or so, and the system is an inspected system which is located outside of the 100-foot regulated area on the property. There is town water in Kimball Avenue, and this house is serviced by public water. The property itself fronts on Nantucket Sound. Access is along Kimball Avenue. Approximate area is 63,972 square feet, and the regulated area or the resource area is the bluff or bank associated along an east-west section of the property in this vicinity here. So the top of the bank is a distinct topographic feature. From the top of the bank, the property is developed. It is an existing manicured lawn area within the 25-foot setback. There is a portion of an existing deck within the 25-foot setback. Within the 50-foot setback, you have both existing structure, which includes decking, and the existing dwelling itself. The area is also manicured lawn in that 25 to 50-foot setback area. The 100-foot setback is along essentially the front line of the existing dwelling, if you will, in this area here. So both the 25, 50, and also the 100 are depicted on the plan. What the applicant proposes is to do a demolition or a tear down of the existing structure and construct a new dwelling on the property in essentially the same area or the same plateau and elevation that the existing dwelling currently exists. The structure itself is approximately a 30-foot high structure from existing grade to the ridge elevation. I have depicted on the survey too the properties abutting to both the east and the west, so you kind of get a sense of the homes that are abutting the property. They are developed in a similar manner, homes which are within that 25, 50-foot regime, and then also lawn area up to the top of the bluff or bank. This particular property does not have a set of its own set of beach access or beach stairs. The property has had a number of permits through the Conservation Commission over the years. Most of them dealt with some renovation and work around the existing structure. There was at one point a set of beach stairs approved for this project. That order of conditions was essentially lapsed and then was closed out upon the sale of the property to the current owner. Currently, there is a set of beach stairs on the abutting property that somehow are used between these properties, but there are no easements in place for the continued use of that set of beach stairs from this property to the property at 17 Kimball Avenue. The project itself, once completed, will show the two areas that were shown here is the orange and the yellow are areas of structure within the 25 and 50 that will be removed. That's an approximate area of 935 square feet of structure removal within that 25 and 50-foot setback. The proposal does have structure within the 50. At the end of the day, the new structure will be partially within the 50. We have asked for waivers for that new construction under the premise that there are no reasonable conditions or alternatives that would allow the project to proceed. And I have also put in there, to the extent applicable, that there is a net benefit to what we're doing under this proposal, in that we are removing that approximately 935 square feet of structure outside the 25 and outside the 50. So the 25 would be no structures within it, and the 50 would be a reduction of what's in there currently within the 50-foot no-build currently. The elevation of the site would, as I had mentioned, pretty much stay the same, maintain essentially the first floor elevation that exists on the existing dwelling. For those of you who were at the site walk, the driveway comes in, the site or the building pad is elevated along the backside along the water side of the property. That would be continued to be maintained. The project, this is the first permitting we've done for the new owners. The project has not yet made any submittals to the HDC. This is our first step here is with regard to permitting it. We have received our DEP file number. There are no mapped NHESP or MESA issues within the area that we're proposing the development. There are mapped areas down along the Sound and along the coastal beach area. However, we're not doing any work down in that area, so the application did not require a filing with NHESP. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. It's a project, I feel it's similar to what we've done, a lot of the cases up in Steps Beach, Cliff area, along Kimball Avenue, where these existing homes have these developed areas. We're essentially working within the footprint of what's already developed, but we have taken the opportunity to at least move the structure somewhat back further from the coastal resource. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Paul?
Real quick, as he finishes his presentation, I did double check with NHESP to speak about that. That habitat is met specifically for piping plover, and this is way out of piping plover zone, so they didn't have any issues, and he didn't have to apply. Just wanted to double check with him. Make sure there wasn't some sort of sneaky plant or something that was in the data.
I guess just only concern I might have is any heavy equipment out up over that bank. I mean, the bank is well vegetated, looks very stable.
Yeah, I mean, it's a non-eroding bank. It's essentially, it is well established. We have proposed our siltation and protective fencing along the top edge there. The excavation component of it is actually further away, because the decking itself is not, there's no foundation underneath that, both the orange and the yellow area. There's no existing foundation out there. Those are just a deck at grade. And the back area here, this is not foundation. That's a covered porch and stone terrace. So the excavation component essentially is running, with the exception of this small little piece here, which is where these two window wells are here, is essentially 50 feet from the top of the bank. Again, this is not foundation, and this is not proposed to be foundation. So the foundation line is actually pretty consistent with the top of the 50-foot setback. So I don't anticipate any issues further back, but there's no need to be further in that back area there. I would anticipate a full foundation. It's an area where groundwater is not an issue. It's an area where the material is also typically sandy soils.
So with that existing screen porches, you'd fill that in and just do sonotubes under the new
Correct.
screen porch?
That's a covered porch. That's right. This proposed right there. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And it's continued. That's actually a stone terrace with a covered porch. In this area, the foundation line would be the hatched line along the backside, which is essentially running along the 50-foot setback, with the exception of probably this 5 to 10-foot section here, which would be full foundation.
Right.
Well, sort of what puzzles me a bit is that the fact is, you're putting a new house there. You're demolishing the old one completely.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting a new house there, and you're asking us to create a waiver for being within the 50-foot no build. And I'm wondering why you don't just pull the new house beyond the 50-foot no build. Why is there no alternative to putting the house moving? It's certainly a large enough lot.
Well, I think when you look at where the grade, where the natural grade, where the grade of the lot is now, which is the plateau, I mean, obviously we want to maintain that plateau. As that house comes forward, that means now filling the front portion of that lot, which is now the lower section. It is, as I said, it's consistent with what it's an existing developed site. We've maintained essentially the developed portion of the site while still reducing some of the impact of the current building footprint within the 25 and 50. I mean, moving the building forward does present issues with regard to the way the grade drops off and the way the site is currently laid out.
I understand that, but we're talking about 3 feet in the grade. We're not talking like...
No, I don't. I mean, the plateau of the house is around 54, and you're down 50. It's about a 5-foot section because there are retaining walls currently along the existing front portion of that house.
Well,
I mean, it's consistent. The application is not inconsistent with what the commission has done along Gosnold Road, along the cliff, along many of the properties up in that area. And then look at, I mean, the area 17 Kimball, which is, I believe, is over here. I think this is 5 Kimball. I mean, you can see where the houses currently are. Now you're pulling the house forward in front of those dwellings. I mean, I think the area of the lot is developed, and they're just looking to maintain what's already out there in that particular area.
What's the square footage beyond the 50? Or within the 50? You said that, did you?
Well, the reduction of the square footage is the 935. I don't know if I have what's left in the 50.
Okay.
But the reduction of structure from what's in the 50 now to what's in the 50 after we're done is a net increase of 935.
Okay. But it's deck that you're reducing.
What's that?
And,
well, it's structure. Deck is structure. Under your definition, deck is structure. So we can't have it one way when we're applying for it's not structure on a new application. It's structure.
Well, I'm not trying to put you on the defensive.
No, but I'm just saying it's just
I don't think that it's a rationale to say that because the commission has approved something in the past that it necessarily goes forward into the future. And I'm just making the point that you're asking us really to give you a waiver when you could move the house back. And I understand your point about how the other houses would block part of the view, but that's not really our purview. So I'm just throwing it out there for
well, I would say this in certain cases, and I would agree. I mean, if you were abutting a coastal dune and it was an area where there was some opportunity here, but it's the bluff is it's not an eroding. It's a vegetated bluff. It's a non-eroding component. The area itself has been developed, long been developed, that the existing footprint is sitting on. I think the resource area itself, in its nature, does 5 feet or 10 feet forward significantly make a difference to the protection of that bank itself. As I said, if we were in a different area where it was a coastal dune and there was an opportunity, that's a little bit different situation than the actual resource area that we're talking about in this application. And as I said, the waivers that I am asking for are not so much, I did mention that it is an existing developed area. There is a net benefit, and
yeah, I mean, I guess I see Ian's point about that, and I also wonder, I know this property just because I've been on it, they have a lot more vegetation. Like, they don't have lawn all the way up to their bluff edge, so this is all going to be lawn from the top of bank to the structure, correct?
well, I mean, that's what's there now. I mean, if this commission sees fit if that's some issue that there can be some type of vegetation or buffer created, then albeit that's up to the commission to, would be happy to entertain that as opposed to now. But what it is now is lawn.
Right.
Yeah, it is lawn right now. Right up to basically, the edge. Yeah, yeah. And I haven't been on, 5's property, but I have been on, this is a client, and 17 is a client of mine also. And I know what you're saying there, it's just a little bit different regime. You've actually, you do have a buffer between the 25, between the top of the bank and that lawn area. So.
Right.
Anything from the public? Yeah, Kevin.
Mr. Chairman, Kevin Dale. I represent the Sacerdote family, Alex Sacerdote and Mrs. Bonnie Sacerdote. I literally got an email message at 5:15 p.m. this evening from Alex Sacerdote, who was concerned about this application, just learned about it. And they own property at 18 and 19 Kimball Avenue, and I think they own 5 also. What I'd ask the commission to do is continue this matter to the 22nd, so I'd have an opportunity to talk to Paul about the project, review the plans, get a better understanding of what's going on here, so I can advise my clients what to do.
Did they not get an abutters notification?
I think part of the problem, if there was, I think they did. I own the 18 and 19 properties at Kimball Avenue as a trustee for that. And I don't know whether or not the notices were sent to me. All I know is Alex contacted me this evening, and in response, I'm asking for 2 weeks. I hope that doesn't.
Kevin,
Where's 18 and 19?
Well, 18 and 19 are right here, across Kimball Avenue. They're
Across.
and I think they own also. Were they on the butters list?
Yeah, Kevin Dale, trustee.
Yeah.
Kimball Ave nominee. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the may have been a mistake on my part not getting the notices to Alex, but I hope that doesn't put the applicant in a dire position, but they really want to look at this carefully.
Well, I'll leave this up to, if he noticed it properly,
Yes.
then I think I'll leave it up to Paul if he would.
Well, let me say this. I object to this application. I don't think the waivers are warranted, and I'm prepared to contest the application until I have time to take a look at it on behalf of my client. And I think if I do, we can come to some accord. I'm not trying to be an extortionist here, but I do want my client to have an opportunity to look at everything.
Even before Kevin's application is against it, I was willing to continue the hearing.
You're a good man, Paul.
I knew Paul would do it anyway.
Okay, so let's see if there's any other questions or comments before we continue here. Let's get everything on the table. Yeah, Ms. McKinnon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ellen McKinnon for the Nantucket Land Council. I just had one thing to bring up that occurred to me when Commissioner Golding was asking about being within the 50-foot buffer zone to the bank. And I just wanted to remind the Commission that there's this performance standard under coastal banks, 2.05, number 8, that talks about if you're substantially redeveloping a property and building a structure within 100 feet of the top of a coastal bank, it talks about the future of use of coastal engineering structures to protect that house or not when there was an alternative. So if you're continuing in any way, maybe the Commission can just review that performance standard
What was that number again?
discussion next time. 2.05, number 8. I know that this isn't an eroding coastal bank, so it's not necessarily that applicable, but I know that a number of properties farther west certainly are. Thank you.
Okay, so if there's nothing else from the public or the Commission, 2 weeks, Paul?
That's fine.
Unless I hear an objection, we'll continue this for 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, now we go to 56 Walsh Realty Trust at 56 Walsh Street.
You guys never come back and visit
Okay. So I'm going to wait for Ben.
I just go ahead.
Yeah, you can start.
Okay, for the applicant, John Bracken, Bracken Engineering. This project is broken up into 2 phases. Unfortunately, they already started construction on the first phase. We were asked to lay out a proposed shed. When we got the plans, we asked if they had any order of conditions for the shed, and they said no, they didn't realize that they needed one. And we also found out that they didn't have an order of conditions for the 2 additions to the existing house that were already underway. They applied for a building permit, received the building permit, didn't realize that they needed to come to the Conservation Commission because they're in the floodplain. Elevation of the site is about elevation 4. The flood elevation, AE zone, is about elevation 7. So what we've asked for is a post facto approval of the additions and approval of the proposed shed and proposed hardscape bluestone patio.
So is the only resource area land subject to coastal storm flowage, or is there any other resource area?
That's the only resource area. If I don't know if anyone has been to the site, but on the northwest corner, there was an existing open deck, which they removed, and they built over it and expanded a covered porch around to the west side of the house that I've highlighted in red. So it's about it about doubled in size of the deck, and again they covered it with a porch before it was open. On the southeast corner of the property, there's actually a reduction in overall square footage of the structure. There was a deck and a small addition. What they've done is they've enclosed between the addition and the house to square off more living area, and they reconfigured the deck, slightly reducing the overall area of the structure. And the proposed conditions, as highlighted, is the shed and the square bluestone patio, as I mentioned, and additional landscaping.
So what's the total impervious surface increase on this site?
We didn't calculate that, but I mean, that's something that we can come up with.
Any other questions? Anything from the public? So otherwise, it's built in compliance with the building regs?
It's built in compliance with the building permit that was already issued as far as the additions go. We did note that there's an additional 84 square foot of structure area that was added on the southeast corner, and like I said, that the porch area is about double the deck area that was there before. And the porch is constructed on sonotubes. The shed will be constructed on probably sonotubes or some the building department will require that the shed be anchored down to the ground where it's in the flood zone and will be below the flood elevation.
Is that a covered porch or just an open?
That's a covered porch. This doesn't show up on that, but I traced. This is where the old deck was. This was the limit of it. So that was taken out, and this covered porch was added.
I'll see one information on.
Yeah, I just think it would just be nice to have, like during a rain event, certainly we've increased runoff surface.
This is a sensitive area down
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, we're not proposing any grade changes, but you're right, there will be an increase with the
And then the
patio and the
bluestone
shed.
too.
Is there anything to handle the rain runoff? Are there any leach pits, or are these downspouts going in anything?
The downspout, there are no downspouts. It has like the open rafter look. We could put in a trench drain, like at the base of it, like we've done in the past. We could add that to it. That would be reasonable.
I hate to be able to dispose part on those, but just remember when we're dealing with the flood zone, that we're not necessarily dealing with rain events or those things. We're really managing the performance standards for that land's ability to absorb and retain flood conditions, not necessarily rain conditions. A lot of times we're dealing with this within the buffer zone to vegetate wetlands, so that's a little bit more of a consideration, but I don't want us to move outside of what was within our regulatory standards.
So on that, Jeff, on that thought, would the additions of patios, porches, anything like that,
Should they
increase
be
the
on
ability
pilings?
to?
Is that what you're asking?
What's that?
Should they be on pilings?
No. What I'm asking is, what effect does that have on the ability for the area to handle storm flowage?
Sure. So I think some of the things that we see for that, if John wants to answer, he might be able to answer it better, is when we look at things for the land's ability to handle flooding and those kinds of conditions, that's when we see designs to incorporate, whether it be pilings or breakaway panels on foundations, that there's specific set, primarily of building codes, to design structural and structural elements within flooded areas. I mean, I remember having a talk about this separately afterwards, but this is a case where you can install drainage structures and infiltration units within these areas, but if you're under 4 feet of water, your drainage unit and your infiltration areas are also under 4 feet of water. So you're not really gaining, the benefit you're trying to protect against is the flooding. So when we look at building designs and the way the sites fit, we're doing that. That's why when we look at sites like this, we're very strict about things like substantial filling or grade changes, where you're essentially, if you add a foot of fill, there's now a foot of water for the entire square footage of the lot that's disappearing from one of these lots. That's a much more significant impact. So flood zone is a little bit tricky, but it's more based on flood and not necessarily based on a 5-year storm or a 10-year storm, where when we look at vegetated wetlands or other inland wetlands, we're dealing with a lot's capacity to transport water to those wetlands correctly, not alter the volumes of water
Not
to those correctly.
handle it and hold it.
Correct. Doing those things.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more of you're filling up the glass kind of problem.
The other thing I might add to that too is that, the existing structure doesn't comply with floodplain requirements, because when they applied for the building permit, it was determined that the structure was not going to be, the addition wasn't going to be more than 50% the value of the structure. Otherwise, it would have been lifted up and flood vents added. I do know they have a shallow crawl space. It does go below ground a little bit, but groundwater here obviously is probably within a foot or two. So,
We'll say that being said, it never hurts to consider stormwater, the going around and what's happening to it. So.
I don't think they would be opposed to, as a condition, to put a drip trench in. It's probably, the right thing to do for small storms, regardless of it's technically required or not. I think we could volunteer to do that.
And the shed's on pilings?
The shed will be on pilings, it'll be anchored, so it won't float away.
So can we just condition that trench and not require
Correct. So this would be
change in
a
plan?
perfect example of a condition that you're putting in place to best protect the resource area. So if you're saying that to help with containing of surface waters or water stacking on the property, that drip trench will help infiltrate stuff from the impervious surface, and that will better replicate than what was there previously. That's certainly something you can do. It's a really long answer to your question.
Okay, if there's nothing else, then do we have what we need to close the hearing?
Yes.
I'd like to close.
Motion closed.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, the
Extra secret plan.
Nathan Family Limited Partnership at 68 and 72 Monomoy Road.
I hope so.
For the applicant, Art Gasparo, along with Arthur Reed. We're in front of you tonight with a notice of intent application for redevelopment of two existing residential properties. The resource areas on these properties have been the boundaries previously approved per a determination of applicability that was issued maybe about 6 weeks ago. I have them shown in blue on the site plan in front of you, and working from the north to the south, there is we're fronting on Nantucket Harbor, coastal beach, coastal dune. The edge of that dune is shown in blue, and then the 25 and 50-foot setbacks to that in pink. We then have a portion of land that is located all within land subject to coastal storm flowage, which runs up against the bottom of a coastal bank. The coastal bank bottom and top are shown in blue on the plan. What I've shown are essentially setbacks off of both the top and the bottom of that resource area. So the yellow lines, the pink lines here are the 25 and the 50 off the bottom of the bank, which then of course overlap into the land subject to coastal storm flowage. And then going up on the higher elevation from the top of the coastal bank, we've also shown the 25 and the 50. There's no 100-foot buffer zone shown here as they go off of the property or overlap with the other resource areas. There are two existing single-family homes that exist on the property. One of them is down in the low area in the land subject to coastal storm flowage, and the other is up on the top of the coastal bank along Monomoy Road. The proposal before you tonight is to remove or renovate each of the structures. The lower structure first is not currently compliant for construction within the flood zone, so it will be brought into compliance and have the mechanicals elevated, and it won't have a basement. It'll either have there's several methods of flood zone construction, so whether it was on piers or whether it was a solid foundation or most likely crawl space with flood panels. But either way, any construction on this dwelling would conform with building code requirements for the flood zone. There's also a secondary structure that's proposed. Again, all of the new structures are proposed outside of the 50-foot buffer zone. Portions of the existing deck are within the 50. It came out very light on the plan because they were grayscaled, but it is shown in here, the deck. And what I've done on a cumulative and per lot basis is to include a chart on the plan that shows that the net decrease in area that we're for the project. There are currently two boardwalks at grade that go down and serve the beach. One of those will be removed and then essentially replaced with a boardwalk at a different location, moving it over to the other to the westerly property line. That is the only area and I've included that structure within the calculation. So we don't have any new structure that's proposed on this lower lot except for within the 50-foot buffer zone, except for that boardwalk. On the upper redevelopment, there is a good portion of the existing house and deck that's within the 50 and within the 25, and that is known as number 68 Monomoy Road. So you can see that we have within 0 to 25, 146 square feet. We're reducing that to 75 square feet. That 75 square feet is only attributable to the set of steps that are proposed right here. And those steps are to get access basically down the coastal bank from the higher area to the lower portion of the property, not all that dissimilar from a set of beach stairs so that someone can then continue down on to the beach. And even as such, there's still an overall net reduction of 71 square feet structurally within that buffer zone. And then within the 25 to the 50, again, we've shown the reductions. Right now there's 1,061 square feet, and we're only proposing 240 square feet in that area. The structures up at the top, there's again a primary, a secondary, and then a proposed pool. In between them, all of those structures, the new portions of those structures, as I said, excepting the set of stairs, have been designed outside of the 50-foot setback. There's currently a large asphalt driveway, that paved driveway. I know there's an awful lot of lines on the plan. And I do have, if it would help, an existing conditions plan that was used with the RDA that I could show you that is in your files as well, that sort of shows existing conditions. But right now, there's all of this pavement that comes down and through here. Again, that pavement would all be removed down in this lower area. I would suggest keeping it through the slope area, which is back in here, where you can see where we tie with a proposed driveway, and then that would be a shell or gravel driveway, so pervious surface. I haven't included in the calculations, because I didn't want to sort of confuse things, talking about that this is about proposed sort of dwelling structures, the area, but I think it may be fair to provide you with, if you wanted more information, that under your regulations, the paved driveway itself is considered a structure. And so there's a large benefit, as we would see it, in the removal of that driveway. But again, I wanted to keep it sort of apples and apples, that what I'm giving you for comparison is what's there for structures, dwellings, decks, compared to what's proposed for structures, including dwellings and decks. And with that, we'd be happy to try to address questions or concerns that you might have with the application.
Anything from the commission?
Is this
Yes.
a new footpath that you're cutting through
New
existing
footpath.
vegetation?
That's right. Yep. So you'd have a walking path.
Okay, so
So you have a set of stairs that kind of come down over in here with a path.
Okay.
What I've shown is the proposed edge of lawn. There's actually existing edge of lawn through here that we would maintain, and then that you would come down to just connect to the driveway right there. I think that might already be a little path, so that's to connect to the stairs would connect down this slope, which is actually not in the resource area itself, to come down through here, and then this would be a walking path over here to get, again, down to connect to this boardwalk, sort of to connect along that side of the property. I did also, if I could just continue for a minute, request a waiver on the basis of a long-term net benefit due to both bringing a structure that's currently not compliant with the land subject to flood, to coastal storm flowage, the flood zone codes, as well as the overall net reductions in areas.
Are the boardwalks, are they just sitting on the sand,
That's
or are
right.
they elevated?
No,
So they'll
they're
just
sitting
be-
on sand. Yep.
Just to define a consistent
Boardwalk at grade, right?
Yeah.
To be clear, and that's how I've labeled them. Because on the label, I actually call it at grade.
Oh, okay.
So, since they'd be cutting through vegetation on a coastal bank, is that something that would be required to revegetate somewhere else? You know, what are...
No, I think this would be a case where they would be essentially looking for a waiver for that.
Just waiver.
And it'll be grassed or something, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's just a footpath, just a grass walking path is what's proposed.
And the reason for the path and the stairs? Just curious. Any idea?
There's two accesses, but again, if that was something that was posing a major concern with the commission, I could talk to the clients about that.
Anything from the public?
Mr. Chairman, Kevin Dale, I represent Mr. and Mrs. Richard Road, who are close by on Cathcart Road. The only thing, I don't see any elevation plans or showing the heights of any structures, and I would assume, but I'd like you to clarify, if the applicant wanted to build particular houses with particular heights, would they not be required to come back here to get an amended order of conditions?
We would anticipate specifically doing that. We would, since we're not showing any elevations of structures here, we would agree, and we believe it's entirely appropriate, that any order of conditions would note that it would be necessary to come back with, as I say, an amended, well, not a minor modification. I think it would be an amended order to show those.
Okay. Any other questions?
Assuming like whatever pool fence is part of the terrace is within this like area.
No, that's a good question. They didn't, the designer didn't tell me exactly where the pool fence would be located on the project. So,
Looks like it's tied into
I think it's tied into the build, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like part of.
Right, exactly, that it would be along this border.
Mhm.
And if you want a condition, I think it would be fair to say no closer than 25 feet. Or, within this area, along this retaining wall.
Well, how high is that retaining wall?
Yeah, is that counting as?
Because would that count as the fence on that side?
Yes.
High enough?
Yeah.
I think it would.
Yeah, so, because that has to be a 4-foot high wall?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is there significant grading, like on the front side of this?
No,
So
no
that's
grading.
the existing-
That's why we're using the wall,
Yeah.
right, exactly. Exactly. And that's what the reason for the stairs in that area.
Well, if there's nothing else, Jeff, do we have what we need to close?
I think we do.
Art, you want to close the hearing?
Yes, unless there's something specific that,
Or if there's
What's the
nothing
call
else?
to close? Right now.
yes, we'd like to close, please.
Have a motion?
Motion to
Close
close?
you this time. Sorry about that.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the land bank at 22 Earth Cart Road.
I'll just say in advance, already, we don't have a following Thursday,
Right.
so.
Oh, they're going to continue this maybe then.
I will, but I would like to present in order to determine any concerns or additional information that you might like me to submit before the next meeting. And then hope that we can close the next meeting.
The only question was maybe the question about the path and the stairs are both necessary. Is there,
On the last application?
is that where?
No.
Is that where you're asking? We're done with that.
No, we're done with that
Never mind. I take it back.
No, I think Ashley asked the last question. He answered my question.
I guess Barrow Blackmore Associates for the applicant, the Nantucket Islands Land Bank. And we're before you tonight for a project located within land subject to coastal storm flowage, and then also partially within the base of a existing coastal bank by definition. This coastal bank, of course, is highly vegetated and not actually contributing sediment to the resource area. The project is to expand the sand parking area that is at the northerly extent of Cathcart Road, adjacent to the drive-on beach access. So what I've shown in blue, there's a vegetated wetland that we're within the buffer zone to, and then the base of a coastal bank, as well as the top of a coastal bank is sort of what's shown. This area, because of slopes, isn't coastal bank, and this area is. If I can just explain in case it's confusing. You have coastal bank here, and then down in here. So, and then the proposed work is outlined in pink, and that is the proposed area of expansion of the parking area. This is the existing parking area here. It comes down at the end of the road, and then we're proposing to clear the vegetation and the stumps in order to just slightly increase or to increase the area for cars to park more regularly down there. The parking is, because of the irregular shape, greatly limits sort of how many vehicles and the usefulness of the area. The purpose of course, is for folks that are accessing the beach, is what they're parking there for. I didn't go through and try to make a case that it's a water-dependent use, though I think that's something you could consider. I did ask for a waiver on the basis of no alternative area that really this could go. What we've done is to try to limit the area of how big this parking lot is, to just make it sort of just regularize what's there and minimize overall impact. At first I had been looking at a much larger area that would have used some retaining walls and structural features that the land bank instead, meeting on site with their representatives, decided to try an approach where we really minimize the overall scope of work and make it better than it is, while not really, getting as many vehicles as possible on a property of this size. The surface would be, the proposal would be to remove the stump, remove vegetation from the site, remove the stumps, remove any topsoil, and then to just, as minimal as possible, supplement with a sandy gravel mix for a surface to the extent that's necessary. Minor grading as a result of taking the stumps out, not major regrading. It's sort of different than a way that I would do a lot of projects, where I would look at this from sort of an engineering perspective of making things regular. We looked at it more in the field to decide and put up some flags. Where can we sort of stop this work so that we don't keep extending our limit of work and impact? And that's why it's sort of an irregular shape around the edge here. And it doesn't show exact number of parking and how people will park. Again, it's trying to take a little pressure off of this area, add a little parking for folks that are using the beach. And that's really the extent of the project. What we've proposed is a staked fiber roll along, instead of just using silt fence or hay bale. I thought it would be better to use something that perhaps stays and let the sediment kind of build up and then biodegrades on its own. So we proposed a little bit larger of a fiber roll, a little different than what you heard in other applications, not for erosion control so much as it is sediment control, so that you don't have anything that's washing down into the vegetated wetland resource area. We're not proposing stormwater facilities in this area because they're so close to groundwater that really there's no way to easily handle that sort of drainage. And then if I had considered, do I do some kind of swales, but then it almost works back against the purpose of the project, that you're disturbing even more area. Given that it's sand, we're proposing it's going to be sand, we're not going to roll it, we're not going to, try to make it any kind of a hard packed surface, just sort of keep it adjacent to the existing sand road that's there. And with that, I'd be happy to try to address questions or concerns. And as I said at the beginning, we will be requesting a continuance to the next meeting, so I can provide additional information if that's needed.
Any questions from the commission? Or the public? Yes, Kevin.
Mr. Chairman, Kevin Dale, I represent Chuck and Nan Geschke. They're butters that live at 78 Monomoy Road. And they commend and support the parking lot on the express condition that it's an alternative and a substitute for vehicles parking on the land of the applicant Land Bank Commission here. Right now, up to 25 vehicles during the season regularly park right on that wetland resource area. More than that, it's against the law to do so. The town of Nantucket has a bylaw that you know, Chapter 56, that regulates vehicles on the beach and says that vehicles can't be on that beach. So it seems to me that if you're going to approve or issue an order of conditions for this parking area, you also put a condition in the order which says that the land bank will enforce the current Town of Nantucket code regulation that says no vehicles, motor vehicles, can be on this beach. It's degrading to the beach. I understand Mr. Gasparo's concern, and he's been very careful about protecting resource areas up here. But what I think is egregious is that there's a continual violation, not only of the town bylaw, but of your performance standards to have vehicles parked on this beach. Now, the regulation I'm talking about, just for your reference, is the Town Code, Chapter 56, Section 5A, which provides that anyone who operates a vehicle, and most importantly, or allows anyone to operate a vehicle on a beach that's regulated, is subject to a $300 a day fine. It's a continuing violation. It can be every day. And the Geschkes are very concerned about this. They think it's a degradation to have this many vehicles parking all the time on this very pristine, valuable resource area. So my point is, if the applicant, the Land Bank Commission, is serious about providing parking over here in this new parking area, at the very least they should enforce the town bylaw and prevent vehicles from parking on their beach, and even put a gate up here to prevent it. And I think it's incumbent on the Commission to support that position and require the Land Bank to do it.
Are they accessing it down through Cathcart Road then?
Yes, they are.
Correct. Is that a marked emergency access point, Jeff, do you know, or is it just?
No, there are none of those marked number signs that you see around the south and northern shore. There are none of those within the inner harbor at this point.
So have they taken it up with the police?
Yeah.
Well, the first step, they heard about this application, and they were here, but they had to leave and asked me to speak for them. I'm definitely going to bring this to the attention of the Land Bank Commission and the police department. But because it's before you, and Land Bank parking is before you, and the purpose of this parking lot is to provide additional parking for people that access this beach, it seems to me relevant and directly related to say, wait a minute, park here but don't park here. It may be outside your jurisdiction, but you certainly could make a point in the order that the Commission agrees to enforce the local bylaw, comply with the law, and not let vehicles park on its beach.
Jeff, what do you think? We've never dealt with anything like that before in my time.
I think since we're continuing for this for 2 weeks, give me plenty of time to figure out how to address that concern. Because I'm not sure about how to put that in the order with the correct language. But if that's something that we're interested in looking in, I can definitely find the answer to that.
Yeah, because it sounds like police just need to be regulating that area.
The land bank.
And the Land Bank,
Posted.
because they Land Bank owns it.
Maybe,
But,
is it
you know,
posted, no
we're
parking?
not in the enforcement business.
Right.
You know, I sympathize with your client's predicament. It makes me nervous to have CONCOM be sort of an extension of enforcement at a level where we're not dealing with that.
I agree. I'm not asking the Conservation Commission to be the enforcement agent. I'm asking the Conservation Commission to include in any putative order conditions it may issue an acknowledgement that the town beach, the land bank beach, is, number one, a protected wetlands resource area that you have jurisdiction over, and secondly, there is a town bylaw that expressly prohibits vehicles from being on that beach, and that you would encourage the Land Bank Commission not to allow vehicles on the beach. Just as a acknowledgement, a directive.
We need some piping plumbers.
That was off the record.
Don't know where you get them, but they look pretty good at keeping vehicles away. Any other comments, questions? Yes, Mike.
Thank you. So Mike Blowacki, I know most of you guys and these guys here have done this table for a while. Just hearing that, I would toss this thought out for you all with respect to Mr. Dale. I would say you deal with the matter that's before you. And if there's a private matter having to do with enforcement, law enforcement, neighborhood disputes and all that kind of stuff, don't buy into that. If the applicant wants to come and say, we've got this kind of an application and we want to do this and want to do that, and also we're doing this on the side, and that's part of the materials presented, that's their choice to do. But don't get into squabbles with other people. Do the job that you're here to do.
It's not a private matter. It's a municipal matter. It's a public matter. It involves a public bylaw, a public municipal subdivision, and the Nantucket Land Bank Commission, the town of Nantucket. So it's not strictly a matter between private parties.
Okay. Anything else? Well, if nobody else has any questions or comments, did you have something in?
Well, no, I'm just
breathing.
It's unexpected. Let's put it that way. The word I would look for.
So we don't have a file number.
I request a continuance to the 22nd, please.
Unless I hear an objection from the commission, we'll continue to the 22nd.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Daisy Field Trust at 78 Nantucket Road, Lot 1.
Thanks.
And I'm probably going to hear kind of the same thing twice here again, I think.
Yeah,
That's
Dan
cool.
Malloy, Site Design Engineering, the applicant. 210 notice of intents in a row for you, basically identical. You've already heard 2 of the 4 lots in this property previously and issued an order for them. And you're going to hear a modification on both of those again in a little while this evening. So with the first notice of intent is Lot 1 in the subdivision.
Yeah, yep.
Oh, yeah. This is a brand new system. You get that one. Anybody wants the plan? Yeah, just stick it. The wetland area is a bordering vegetated wetland, which was previously approved under an RDA. So the work proposed is in the 100-foot buffer zone. There are no waivers proposed. The work in the buffer zone is a portion of a second dwelling and a pool. The only work inside the 50 is some grading. What you see in the plan across the back is a straight orange dashed line right across here. The project is also just finishing review by NISA, the Endangered Species, and they've come to terms and agreement that this is the line that they want us to hold in terms of preservation beyond it, which is part of the reason why you're going to see modifications on the other 2 lots we've approved. They were presented to you in one form, and now they've agreed to this line. So what you're seeing here, 25-foot buffer zone will remain either undisturbed or actively mowed as a meadow as it is right now. No new work, no alteration to it whatsoever. There'll be either a split rail fence or posts put in along the MESA line once they actually issue their approval. This is the line they've agreed to and have the actual approval in writing yet. That's forthcoming. So we're asking for tonight, buffer zone, 100 is in blue, asking for approval for a pool in the second dwelling and some grading in the buffer zone, intruding partially into the 50, and there's no waivers involved.
Just grading, no retaining walls or anything? Just kind of
No structures in the 50 whatsoever.
Pool fence ties into the past.
Pool fence will tie into the dwelling.
Yeah,
so it's outside the 50.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Anything from the public?
I guess my question, so it's kind of a meadow right now, so are you transitioning to lawn up here that's going to be, say, fertilized, et cetera? Like a more...
This will be lawn. We're not asking for fertilizer placement, but it'll be lawn and landscaping of some fashion. And everything that's meadow from this point down. So here's the existing tree line, roughly. If that's active meadow now, that will be maintained. The tree line is here. So everything from that tree line to that orange line will be maintained as active meadow. Part of the MESA permit will actually require that it be mowed at least once or twice a year, I believe. That's it, so no work in there. It's other than active mowing, that's it.
And so you're not going to be altering more than 20 or 50% of the 25 to 50?
No, we're not. All 4 lots, you can see that there's an overall plan on the top of the sheet. All 4 lots, the orange line, that's the MESA line, takes into account as well the 50% rule, 25 to 50. So you average it across all 4 lots, it doesn't impact more than 50%.
But I guess we're looking at just this lot for this one.
You're looking at just this lot, and the intention being that if it's approved based on this plan with that line. And that line cannot change. Both in your eyes and also the MESA permit is going to specifically reference the recordable plan with that line on it.
Right.
I think, just to clarify a little bit, I think that yellow line, the MESA line, is set on purpose to take into account that 50%. So where it sits and where the buffer zone curves away gives enough area where you're not hitting that 50% threshold. I think it's there.
That's one that I'm going to take into consideration with coming up with the 50% requirement and also providing the MESA approval where they wanted the line, which is essentially what that orange line is. Cuts it right down.
If there's no further question.
I just have one more. Do you have like roof runoff? Like, what are you going to do with the drainage issues, or is it all?
There's nothing shown in the plan. Typically, we do put roof frames on these. We haven't specifically shown it here, but that's pretty common in every one of the houses that we put them on. It's certainly something that can be added as a condition that downspouts and drainage systems would be incorporated. That's very common in all the houses nowadays.
Anything else? Anything from the public? Okay, Jeff, do we have what we need to close the hearing?
Yes, sir.
Would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Do I have a motion to close?
Motion to close. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks. So now we'll go to Daisy Field Trust Lot 3.
Should look just like the last one.
All right, so this is the same, again, Dan Malloy, again, Site Design Engineering, same exact presentation. Essentially the same project, just a different lot. We're dealing with the same wetland resource areas. Again, the orange line being the MESA line that they've set. So we're looking for, again, the blue line is the 100-foot buffer zone. We've got a second dwelling, portion of a pool, and very minimal grading behind the house. You'll notice in this version, because of the angles of all the buffer zones, the 50-foot buffer zone is in pink, which most of that 50-foot buffer zone is on the wetland side of the MESA edge. So we're actually doing the only real work in the MESA, in the 50-foot line is this tiny little bubble right here. So in this case, we're also honoring, say, 90% of the 50-foot buffer. We're not even encroaching in it. Aside from that, it's the same as Lot 1, which you just looked at here. So now you're looking at Lot 3 right here. So again, there's the MESA line, which tells the woman's work, and there's the 50-foot buffer. And no waivers requested on this.
Any questions? Anything from the public? Okay, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Do I have a motion to close?
Motion to close.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Elizabeth Von Sumner and John J. Moeller at 10 Mountain Creek Road. Don't see a file number on this one either.
We don't have natural heritage, Sue. So.
Oh, okay.
Brian Madden from LEC Environmental, representing the applicants. We were recently before you on this property for some driveway enhancement work and some restoration of the buffer zone. This NOI is for construction of a new single-family dwelling. There's, I think as most of you saw, there's an existing small cottage in the far eastern portion of the property. The proposed structure itself, which I've highlighted in pink, is outside the 50-foot buffer zone to the coastal bank boundary by definition that was approved under an RDA back in 2014. There's very little expansion into vegetated areas. The only areas, there's a minimal tree line that will be clipped there in this location, as well as the front entrance, a portion of which the proposed driveway into the property is located within the 25-foot buffer zone. We have requested a waiver for that work. It's on the opposite side of the driveway, again, to a state definition coastal bank. We believe there will be no impact to the resource areas, and there's no reasonable alternatives to access the property otherwise for the driveway and utility connection. There's proposed subsurface storm tech chambers for stormwater, collect and treat the runoff, to propose here, and there's also a dry well on the proposed driveway area to collect some of that runoff too. And basically summarizes the proposal.
Any questions for Brian?
Where was that, the retaining wall from that, is that on the neighboring property? I'm like just missing it on here.
It's
like
on
right
the
in here.
neighboring parcel.
Okay. Just trying to orient myself.
Anything from the public?
Yeah, based on all the work next door and on the driveway, we kind of decluttered things a little bit.
We've seen this movie times,
I feel like we've seen this property like every meeting. But
Should be allowed. Or no.
No, it's not.
No, I won't be. If there's nothing else, you want to continue, Brian? I guess you don't have much choice.
Yes,
2 weeks?
22nd, please.
That's a head objection. We'll continue this to the 22nd. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. That takes us to amended orders of condition. Kelly at 78 Union Street.
It's continued.
Oh, that continued, I'm sorry. So, go to the public meeting, request for determination. Chase at 31 Pocomo Road.
For the applicant, Art Casparo, Black & Associates. Before you tonight, what's that? Oh. No, this is the right one.
This one?
Yeah. For revision date. For a request for determination of applicability, there's no work proposed. This is strictly to confirm resource area boundaries. And what I've shown on the plan is in blue, the boundaries of, there is a vegetated wetland, border and vegetated wetland resource area, as well as a coastal bank, based upon the definition of where the flood zone and intersects it related to the slope, as well as land subject to coastal storm flowage. And to go over it briefly, the dashed line that I've shown is the land subject to coastal storm flowage, which is here at elevation 9.4. And then down in the lower part, you can see the wetland flags that were delineated by Brian of LEC. And then we have a more restrictive coastal bank up in here. And the revised plan that Jeff had referenced was just, there was some flags over on the abutting property, but we didn't want to show flags on another property, and the coastal bank is the more restrictive resource area there. So that's the reason, just to explain why there's a revision date on this plan, which was brought to my attention by your technical consultant, who has reviewed these determination and I believe supports the boundaries as shown on the plan.
Did Bruce check these? Yeah.
Yes.
And he's okay with them, huh?
Yes.
Any questions on this part? Say not. Jeff, do you have a recommendation?
I do. I recommend we can issue a Clause 2A confirming the resource areas as shown on the
Do I have that motion?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, minor mods.
I got it in a second, we'll just wait.
Grove Lane Realty Trust, 24 Grove Lane.
Okay. You got a plan?
What's that?
You got a plan, you can just go for it.
Okay, I only have one. Brian Madden from LEC Environmental. An order of conditions for this raise and rebuild was issued back in April. And the proposed changes are as follows. The garage was shifted further to the north. It was previously back a little bit further. And a covered breezeway mudroom, was added, connecting the main house to the garage. Formerly there was a landing there. I think this is a draft. So there's a covered breezeway mudroom area and a little small deck step area to the south with an outdoor shower here. And we had some additional sewer details and geothermal well locations. But the proposed structural revisions result in a net decrease of 6 square feet in the 50-foot buffer zone.
Any questions?
So, yeah, I'm curious. The geothermal well, is it a closed system?
It's an open loop system, so it'll be one supply well and one discharge well.
So 2. For the
I was
record,
just
Don, you
curious.
want to say your name?
I'm sorry, Don Bracken Engineering, project engineer.
Do you have a professional opinion of what you prefer, whether you prefer a closed system or?
I think it depends on the location and the water quality. A closed system is a lot more expensive than an open system. Most people choose to go with the open system because of the water supply that's found on most of the lots.
And so you feel this will have no impact?
On the hydrology of the area, I don't believe so for the volume that's typically used. There is some groundwater mounding at the discharge well, and there's also a cone of influence at the supply well. Generally, from what I've seen, when people have done calculations, that zone is usually about 25 feet or so in diameter, and can drop the water table 2 or 3 feet, something like that, in the area of the supply.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I asked.
Okay.
Best answer you got to the question.
Anything else? Okay, Jeff, do you have a recommendation?
I do. I recommend that we could approve this as a minor modification.
I have that motion.
Just for the record, we don't sign anything for these.
I have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, McCarthy House LLC at 12 Coffin Street.
For the applicant, Gasparo Blackmore Associates. This is a minor modification to improve the project to essentially tweak the locations of the structures that have been approved in a direction further away from the resource areas. The entire project is within land subject to coastal storm flowage. What I've shown on the plan in pink are the 25 and 50-foot buffer zones, and then in red what was approved, and then in the darker bold lines what's being proposed. There's essentially 3 structures that are associated with it, and the southerlymost one there's no change, which is why it's red and then not really shown in black, but it's as approved, so it's not really a subject of the minor modification. The other 2 structures are proposed to move about 4 to 5 feet to the north from where they were approved, and so that's what's shown. The easterly, the easterly structure is essentially exactly the same in footprint and just a shift, whereas there is one change that's proposed to the other approved structure, which is that this was a deck, and now they want to make it a porch. So now I call it proposed enclosed porch, whereas it was approved all as deck. And but it's within what was approved footprint. So again, we're just trying to, the architects have been working on the design since the approval, and before we get underway, we just want to be sure that everything is blessed by the commission.
Any questions? Jeff, do you have a recommendation?
Yes, I recommend this meets standards for minor modification.
Do I have that motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, Daisy Field Trust, 78 Nantucket Road, lot 2, and then we'll do 4.
Site design engineering for the applicant. So this is lot 2. Just earlier you just heard lots 1 and 3. You've previously approved an order of conditions on lot 2. We're asking for the modification here just to update the site plan. The plan you approved had a limit of work line that was closer to the wetland on this lot, and the MESA line has now been set. Again, it's the orange line on the plan. That has pushed everything a little bit further from the wetland. That's essentially it. The scope of work is the same. Some of the buildings and the grading have pushed forward a little bit. You'll see on this plan, on lot 2.
The original one?
I'm sorry.
So you move things back a little bit?
Everything's been pushed forward a little bit. So you'll see here, the orange line is the MESA line, the pink is the 50. So the limit of work in the 50 on this lot has shrunk quite a bit. That's the new one. Yeah, so here you have your orange, the same plan. The orange line is the MESA line, and the pink is the 50. So originally, the scope of work was farther down into the 25 to 50. Now it's been pushed up, and only work in the 50-foot buffer zone, again, is this little corner. There were no waivers requested originally. There are none requested now. It's strictly an updated plan. The scope of work is the same.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve this as a minor mod?
Motion to approve this as a minor mod.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, now we'll do the Daisy Street Trust, Nantucket Road, lot 4.
cleanse palette, they have to be the same.
Okay, here's the fourth one, this is the last. So now we've looked at 1, 2, and 3. Here's number 4. On this plan, again, you'll see the orange line, which is the MESA designated limit of work line. On this lot, previously there was more activity happening in the back end here. This point here had more grading and development in it, and now with this MESA line having, again, pushing things towards Nantucket Road. So the pool and the house, everything is shifted forward a little bit. The house is a little bit smaller than what was previously proposed. Scope of work is essentially the same here. There's no waivers requested again. The limit of work line is the orange. It does come closer up to the 25-foot buffer zone along this side here. However, the 25 to 50% designation we've been talking about is the same. It's when it's averaged across all the lots, we're still in conformance with that. But being, if you looked, remember on the other plans, some of the properties had little to no impact on the 25 to 50. And right now, this is all meadow, so we're not taking out new vegetation. It's all active meadow field.
It's all being regraded here, though.
And this side is being regraded down here. The only new vegetation alteration is where the driveway comes in up front, that hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed when we previously approved is the scope of work in this corner and the scope of work on this side.
Because that new line.
They've pushed us, instead of allowing us to be more linear, they've pushed us. For whatever reason, I can't give you a specific one, they preferred the meadow preservation on this end versus over here. On the original plan, we actually had preservation of this more, less here. And it's been flipped.
It's closer to the water.
Still no waivers requested.
Okay. Any other questions? Jeff, do you have a recommendation?
Yes, this is qualifies as a minor modification.
Do I have a motion to approve this as a minor mod?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. UMass Boston at 180 Pulpus Road.
It's going to actually be only small versions of the plan here, so it's just easier to list out what they have from the letter. Essentially, though, we had originally permitted the kind of the remodeling and reconstruction of that laboratory building at the field station, and as they've completed their design, they've revised essentially where some of the utilities are going to be relocated. They've clarified what type of drainage and perimeter drains they're going to be using around those structures, and then they've also clarified their accesses for what's going to be there, whether they were going to be brick or wood, and the stairs going in. So those are kind of details that they didn't have on the original plan for downspouts and pavers for going in. Some of the grading right around the building, the perimeter drain along the west foundation wall, drywall for the perimeter drain, and then they are relocating some of the existing utilities, like the septic line tying in from the toilet, because the toilet is moving in the building from one side to the other, so they're relocating that. And then in front of the building, there's some wooden posts going in so someone can't back into or drive into the building. And then the rest is pretty much standard. So it's still all within keeping of the original permit. They're just kind of clarifying some of the details.
So do you have a recommendation?
Yes, I'd recommend this also a minor mod.
I have that motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, certificates of compliance. Okay. Fraser, 33 Jefferson Ave.
All right, so this was for the site development at 33 Jefferson Ave. We continued this last time because I had a little confusion on which plan a piece that was on the as-built was from in regards to a fence that we had approved with a waiver. But it was correct, I just looked at the wrong plan, and we were just trying to sort that out, so they took an extra 2 weeks. But other than that detail, which we sorted out, everything is built in compliance with the permits that were issued, and everything is in compliance with no ongoing conditions that are necessary from the project, so.
So we can approve this as a minor mod?
Nope, this is a certificate of
This is
compliance.
yeah,
But yes,
okay.
you can.
So a motion to issue the certificate of compliance.
So moved.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries
I didn't have to
unanimously.
find your name on service.
Okay, McGilvray Family Trust for 30 Rhode Island Ave.
Yeah, it's probably going to be weird for you to come back and see projects. Sorry, that one. Sorry. Yep, that's what's up. So this was for the installation of the tight tank out at 30 Rhode Island Avenue. And they have met all the requirements and it's been installed correctly. And they have provided us their operation and maintenance agreement. They have to maintain the pump, which was sent out from Visco Pumping on the 5th of March of 2014. They're still maintaining, so they have met all of their requirements in their order of conditions, and I would recommend that we can issue the certificate of compliance on this as well.
I have that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, Childs, 19 Madawi Creek Road.
All right. Yeah, so this one was for, we have to close an address. So this was for the construction and maintenance of the septic line, driveway, grading, and landscaping, excess of 50 feet. So you can see the septic system's kind of shoehorned in there a little bit from the as-built plan. But again, it is constructed in compliance with their original order of conditions.
No ongoing conditions? Do I have a motion to issue the cert on this?
Motion to issue the certification.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, Mitchell at 11 Madawi Creek Road.
All right, so this is another one. This was for the construction of the tennis court and a second-story deck. This is from 2009. So it's getting older, and there were all of the conditions were related directly to the construction. It is constructed in compliance with their order, and I would recommend that it could be issued with a certificate of compliance.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay.
Sorry, Paul. What's that? We'll put the extensions at the very, very.
Oh, that's okay.
Orders of conditions.
All right, so some of these that are on the list we didn't close this evening.
Well, the first one we have is APG DRS.
We
Oh, we didn't get that one.
Didn't get that one. We ended up continuing that because we had quorum issues. I think the first one that we'll see is the 13 Fayette Street. 42 Union Street LLC.
Okay. 42 Union Street LLC.
These are the three projects we'll kind of have right in a row. They were for this was the first one for the redevelopment of the funeral home site off of Fayette Street. So it's a flood zone project. I never have any conditions for these things. They're kind of straightforward, so I'm just kind of stoked. I do try to come up with them sometimes.
Yes, Okay, Stumpy.
Well, if there's no questions or concern, do I have a motion to issue as drafted? Oh, wait.
Oh, are we on the right parcel number?
Yes.
Okay.
This is the 28.1.
Yeah.
There's 28.2 and 28.3. Joanne and I spent about 2 days with Don figuring all the
Yeah,
street
which is
addresses and parcels. It was awesome. Even if you talked to the assessor once, it was pretty great.
So do I have a motion to issue as drafted?
So moved.
Second.
Everybody ready to vote on this?
Ian's not in on the
Ian's
Ian,
not
Ian,
here.
Ian.
Okay,
Oh.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
So I'm just gonna
Okay,
fetch
that
it.
motion carries with Commissioner
Taking zero.
Golding recused.
Taking all chance at it.
You gotta sign, then I can. Okay, 42A Union Street, Union Street Partners LLC.
This is the second
Same
one of
site.
those projects, same site,
Same site, right?
same exact order except for the names and the parcel have changed from the address.
Well, in that case, do I have a motion to issue as drafted?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You recusing again, Ian? That motion carries with Commissioner Golding recused. And there are 3 of these, if I remember right. Okay, 11 Fayette Street, Union Street, Partners LLC at 42 Union Street.
Sorry, anticlimactic, but it's this is the third lot of all of those.
Do I have a motion to issue as drafted?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries with Commissioner Golding.
No, Ian's in on this one.
Ian's on
We
this
hear this one
Sorry.
on the first time.
Carries unanimously.
Is there one more?
Nope.
So, Harbor View Way, Town of
LLC
Nantucket,
screwed you up.
at
Oh, that's
15
what
Two and a
Minutes.
half,
Okay,
yeah, after.
Yep, Harbor
This
View.
is Children's Beach.
Yep, this is the Children's Beach project, so just to clarify, in the permit overview, it does include that the structures within lakes up to coastal storm flowage, then the buffer zone to the coastal beach and the coastal bank. And I put in parentheses that it's a bulkhead, so it's not a primary bank, but outside of that, I couldn't really think of any specific conditions that were there for that site. It's pretty straightforward.
Do I have a motion to issue as drafted?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
One more time.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
All right. Next one's going to be, I don't want to say a little bit tricky, but for, I don't even know what I'm trying to say, for the Siricos. Joe and Ian are not eligible on this one. Say, we closed that public hearing without them on the commission. I get the plan, guys. It's very tricky over with me.
Still got 4 of us here, though.
Yep, we still have a form. So this is a non-waiver project. I'll get it back out. We didn't hear it tonight, so real quickly. I know it's a lot going on, but it was for kind of the redevelopment of an existing site. Again, everything is outside of 50 feet for structures. Nothing is proposed inside the 25. Didn't require any waivers for what was going on. I had instructions to draft upon it. So.
Looks compliant anyway. Do I have a motion to issue as drafted?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. With Commissioner Topham and Golding recused.
I will say, that was our 2,800th notice of intent that we've had for Nantucket. Was that?
Wow.
2,800. What a record.
Huh?
We got a pretty good
That's
beat
a
on a
count?
lot of other regions. 2,800 is a pretty good number. A lot of the others are still in the hundreds.
Do we get an award?
What do we get?
We're
for
not
that?
like winning or anything, but we.
We work the hardest.
I wouldn't guess so.
Well, we need something, a celebration for the 3,000.
3,000 is what's up with we're going right now. We'll have that like by then.
LLC at 9 Kimball Ave.
We didn't actually close that.
Let's continue.
Oh. Sorry?
That was one that after Paul got shaken down.
Oh, okay.
I assume you had a draft order for
Wicked.
Did we
We're gonna have to have a metal
didn't
detector
close
at the
Wall
door.
Street either, did we?
56 Wall Street, this is another one. This was just a flood zone. The only thing, there's a typo in there in the permit overview. I decided to add a 0, so the word 2.
Yeah.
Land subject to coastal storm flowage. Well, other than that, I couldn't really think of any.
So this is where there's going to be the drain area?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so there'd be 19, that, a trench
The
drain.
trench drain, perimeter drain.
Yeah, trench drain shall be installed around the perimeter of the building.
Okay, okay.
This is the one where they've already done part of the addition, right?
Yes,
Not.
they had started construction. I guess I'm a little more weirded out that the building department usually be very good about catching flood zone stuff, making sure that it comes back.
So-
I'm surprised that it got a building permit without someone noticing.
Do we need to almost note that that's already happened in the permit overview? No.
Unless we want to take some sort of punitive action.
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Did we close an Nathan?
Yes.
Okay, an Nathan on 6872 Monomoy Road.
All right, so this is the one that had the 2 lots. I do have a condition added to this one, but just really quickly. There's some areas where they're removing the boardwalk that's going to be restored. And a few other areas that are going to be disturbed. So just for that area, I've just asked for some photographs, just demonstrating what it looks like. And I think anyone that's been on the Monomoy shore knows that it's kind of prone to knotweed and bittersweet on occasion. So I've included this condition 21. It's kind of a new condition that we've been adding, that if any invasive species is found within that area that's being restored, so if knotweed comes in first, that to come in and approve the method of removal at a staff level so we can get it treated quickly. So if you see a sprout of knotweed coming up, you can call up and say, hey, there's some knotweed, we'd like to remove it, and we're going to be doing this to do it, and hopefully be done with it, instead of trying to wait.
And Joe, we pretty much have standard protocols that
Okay.
Yes.
routinely-
We've approved a lot of knotweed removal projects in the last 3 to 5 years, so we've got it pretty well.
How are we dealing with phragmites? Does that just have to go? I mean,
Well, they're both tough to deal with. I think we've seen some product change for herbicides that have been used on both knotweed and phragmites and different sequencing for both of those over time.
how are we dealing with it on an approval basis? Is there a staff approval?
Yeah, for those two, I feel pretty good about. We've been issuing kind of the same standard treatment methods for those two.
Yeah.
Something that comes in that's really out of the blue that we haven't someone found like mile a minute or something.
Yeah.
That we just haven't seen or dealt with before. I would probably bring that in or find someone that's dealt with it and has a good practice for it, and then come back. And I would rather proactively remove it and treat it than give it a few weeks to get a jump start on something. That's it. It makes a difference.
It probably depends on, I mean, these kind of things too, these tend to be pretty small.
Yeah, right.
You know, and so it's, you can remove them with the minimum, kind of the minimalist techniques.
Yep. Yep. And then with this one too, obviously since there's a pool that's within the 100, do we have our normal conditions for pools that they can only be drained or discharged to areas outside of the commission's jurisdiction? And this is the one, condition 22, that the applicant should file an amended order request with specific building plans prior to the start of construction.
Okay, do I have a motion to issue as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, Daisy Field Trust, Lot 1.
All right, I do actually have a change to this one, because when we were dealing with these lots before, we hadn't gotten the final permit or determination. Actually, you know what? We can leave that 19 on there, because then we'll add it to the file, because they've received their final determination for NHESP for those lots, so that way all the lots are consistent for what has been required. Because that was still a little bit up in the air. Approved lots 2 and 4. So they have just proactively met that condition. But all of that is for the lots on that road that Dan had chose.
No waivers or anything, so.
Nope. So, refresh my memory. On the second of the 2 David Field Trust applications, Lot 3, the pool equipment was right on the 50-foot line, right?
Correct.
Do we need to address that at all in terms of drainage and as such? And was it the same?
Oh, the pool itself just crossed over the 100. So if we want to add our pool condition in, we certainly can. Pools can't be drained or discharged.
I'd like to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 20.
We can do that for both of them. It really makes a difference there.
And is there something, I know it's part of the natural heritage, but as far as the mowing twice a year, like when that's timed, or just that they follow that, you know, so like for the undisturbed portion?
Yeah, I mean, they have to follow the that's given to them by natural heritage, and that's a condition they have to meet through their permitting.
Yeah. Okay.
They're pretty good about keeping track of it.
A motion to issue as amended.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, so on the Daisy Field Lot 3, we'll add that same condition 20.
Yes.
And do I have a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, that's what we have draft orders for. Jeff, do you want to discuss any others?
No, I don't think we proposed anything else tonight that we require discussion. Sorry, there's more agenda on the back side of it. Not much, but there is a lot.
Yeah.
Sneak it in.
Set us up.
Okay. Extension orders at the Hither Creek Boatyard at 20 North Cambridge Street. We have 2 of them, SC 482109 and SC 482141.
Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos representing the applicant Hither Creek Boatyard, Inc., also known as Nantucket Marine. What we're asking for is 2 separate extension, 1-year extension requests for both our order of conditions that was issued for the upland portion of the site, and then the one-year extension on the order we had for the in-water portion of the site. So it had to do with the dock expansion and slip work. And then the upland section, which we've amended a number of times now, we're just looking for a one-year extension on both of those permits. Which would be the first extension. We haven't asked for an extension up until now.
I'd recommend they make all the qualifications to get an extension as spelled out in our regulations.
Okay, so I guess we should separate these. So for SC 482109, do I have a motion to issue the extension, one-year extension?
Motion to issue.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Now for SC 482141, do I have a motion to issue a one-year extension?
Motion to issue the extension.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, approval of minutes.
This,
I noticed one of the yellow marks on everybody's talking at once.
First one, welcome you.
I want somebody to.
Good for you. I think it's going to get better for you.
All downhill.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Sourcing, maybe sediment sourcing.
Really like
The blue and black, they're
He
great.
said that when someone's getting seats up, he said, yeah, but the champs.
The problem is when you're at a meeting and you get these extensions, and if you get stuff you get,
Well,
you know, sooner or later you get paid for it.
I have no idea what belongs in there.
Sooner or later, they're all going to come through minutes.
So do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Well, Ashley's suggesting that. What is that line?
Well, it might be like our sediment sourcing, so it didn't have invasives or something. I can't think of what, like the source of fill.
Say again, Ashley?
It could be like the sediment source or the source of fill.
Yeah.
Maybe we were. Yeah.
What done?
Oh, sorry.
Sourcing and solvents.
Didn't know you stuff.
Oh, she's a girl.
Oh, now they're out of order. God. Housekeeping.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Either Joe, I believe you were also out on the approval of minutes
So
that you
there's-
were not there as part of the committee. I think you're sampling.
That could be it. I'm
Yeah.
not sure, though.
Because that was for removing the wall and the wetland.
Yeah.
And to fill, like, back towards it. That's all I can think.
Maybe, yeah, it's Phil's sourcing or
Yeah.
something.
Which one is that for?
For the 10 Monomoy Creek.
I mean, I know the discussion that entailed where they were getting the fill from, to
Yeah.
make sure it didn't have invasives in it.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it must
so I
be
think that's
Phil.
what it is.
Must be Phil.
Bill sourcing?
Yeah. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. It's really great to get these minutes every week and just get them done.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
You bet. Okay, reports. CPC,
Nothing to report.
NPDDC's gone, mosquito control is gone.
Keep your officials there.
Oh, we're going to need some new, once
That's it,
Andy
right
gets
there.
back, we'll reassign. But I hear a rumor we've got somebody volunteering for CPC.
Now, that rumors.
Do you want to do it? Well, Jeff, should we just give Ian the job of CPC if he wants it?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. That was great.
Or something, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's different from the first time around when everybody was I was, the victim the first time around, but I ended up late.
All right, we do have to appoint someone, however. I don't have a lot of information. I sent away for some on the Mosquito Control Committee, so I don't think it's overwhelmingly pressing to replace Sarah, but we do need to replace our designee onto the Mosquito Control Committee at some point.
I sort of have a conflict.
I'm sure I could take that one
All right.
on. I can't
Anyone else have
imagine
any
it very
interest?
too much in the fall.
No, Ian took my seat, so on that one.
You gonna take
Okay,
that?
Ashley, you want it?
I mean, I could take it.
Well, here, why don't we'll preliminary slate you up
Yeah.
for it, and when I get more information, if it looks like it's really not going to work, we can have the discussion again.
Yeah.
They're committees. I'm pretty flexible. If there's a change partway through, or if someone feels that they're not comfortable with the committee anymore, or it's taking up too much of their time, or they don't really enjoy it, I mean, we can switch. I mean, it's a representative of the board, so if someone gets tired of it, or you're like, I just can't meet my scheduling demands, I have no problem calling up another board and saying, hey, we're switching representatives because our current one, because you guys are essentially representing the same common interest, regardless whether it's Ashley or Ernie or Dave. Right? You're still representing the town, so. And they'll jump up and down, because then they have to, give everyone new stuff. But that's small potatoes.
Okay, commissioners' comments.
Notice back on the agenda, commissioners' comments.
Well, I'm pleased to be back. Yeah, so.
Please be.
Yeah, great.
Well done.
Pleased to have you guys.
Yeah, especially with that agenda. Okay, Mr. Administrator, do you have anything else?
I do have a couple things. There are a couple projects that I've been working on that, one of them I had ready for tonight, but after looking at the agenda for tonight, I decided to hold off dealing with some of the questions we had about open enforcement actions. I decided that could wait 2 weeks, so we weren't dealing with a meeting that was going to go to 7:30. So with that being in front of us, and we also have a little bit of an update on the application fees. The only other thing I wanted to bring up, and we can discuss it when we have a full board and Andy's back. I think it may be good, I don't know if we want to do it as a special meeting sometime, but we can set up a time to do it. I think it would be good to add to the agenda at some point, or just to have even a short, like 1 hour special meeting, doesn't have to be on a Wednesday, whatever works for people. Something to just go over if there's anything we want to change policy-wise or procedure-wise, or stuff that we want to discuss kind of in the next year. I know invasives is kind of high on the list. If we want to, cover a fertilizer thing at some point, and just when we have lighter agendas, which I know seems distant at this point, but lighter agendas, we might be able to add some of those things in to get some more information and do those things. But I want to be sure we're covering it, and then if there's anything we want to change in the fine print on the agendas, if people think we should be doing things a little bit differently, or even stuff that's as simple as how we hear, minor modifications, or how we hear certificates of compliance, or different things, just kind of a procedural, I can't even say the word, procedural meeting. Just more for you guys to say, or just to openly say, I don't like how we do this in the meeting, I would rather do it this way, and to kind of take care of some basic housekeeping. Or if, as everyone's kind of moved through now, if it's time to revisit, if you think there are regulations that we've had a lot of projects that you don't feel are working correctly or properly and need to be updated, if we need to kind of open that box up again and do even a couple short regulation hearings, if there's those issues, we can try to address those too. So it's more of a state of the union kind of thing for us, especially now that we have, in the last year, 3 new members in the last calendar year. So we've had a pretty good rollover. And Dave's really only been with us now a year.
Just a year.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and Ashley too. So, I mean, really a majority of the board is, you guys are unfairly in for 3.5 hours now. But just to kind of
good way to break them in.
Yeah. Or if there are questions that you guys have, especially through your first year, for what's going on, or something that isn't giant. But that's it for me.
Well, speaking of invasive species, Tim Simmons is coming out, I can't remember what for, I think in September. And it looked like he might have time to come and address the commission on, at least on, a few topics. Like I know a big one for Mike was sort of our concern with certain species on Nantucket, like black pine comes to mind, that seem to be a problem out here but aren't on the state list. And have Tim address some of that. Well, what happens if you got locales that are, it's not a statewide problem, but maybe it's a problem here. And maybe just, have him review our protocols and, I think, talk to him about spraying Phragmites. And, now Sarah's not here either. She had a big concern with that.
No. I think most of us have a concern with Phragmites, and it's so invasive.
Well, it's just, Long Pond, the spraying protocols, though, and stuff.
Yeah. I just want to be sure everyone's feeling equipped for kind of the diversity of applications that are coming in.
Mm-hmm.
We can cover those. I don't want anyone to feel like they're overwhelmed. They're just kind of feeling their way through the dark for some of them. So,
any word from George on what's happening with SPPF on the settlement, or is that just bogged?
the last I heard is it was with them for their review, and that's the last I heard of it.
It's where it sits still.
Yeah, if they complained we didn't get them to that fast enough, and now they've been sitting on it for so kind of nowhere at the same time. Be nice to get the specter of some of that to take a fresh start on some of those things.
I've heard rumors that they're planning to take it to the town meeting or something, or take some stuff to town meeting. And
those rumors are always around. I still hear rumors of getting Joe Farrell to sink giant ships off the coast.
Yeah.
We'll wait and see. When they come in, they come in. So
they want to decommission an aircraft carrier. Well, they'll take it off there.
We take him as
Joey's
they come.
done it.
So
Not
sounds
off the
like
coast,
fun.
but he did sink that.
Yeah, it is. Our agenda's heavy enough. We don't need to add more than we need to.
I did have someone suggest there's a lot of broken down cars off Tucker now.
Like,
Can't we just drive them out there? To
I don't
stop
know.
Just leave them where they are. They'll be out there
It
sooner or later.
seemed like a
Have you seen that?
Seemed like a cross of two
You
photos.
guys go swimming the other day?
Try and break up waves coming.
Is that real? Does anybody know?
Yeah,
Is it a bunch of sharks?
It's at one shark off of,
What's up, Cliffside?
off of, I guess.
It's pretty big.
I'm wondering if it's real.
Oh, is that that Greg Hinson one?
Yeah.
This one's from like a week ago or something.
Is it real or not?
Yeah, I don't think that one's real.
No, that was like
Was he
Cliffside.
doctored?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there was some pretty fantastic shots of some seal predation off Monomoy Island.
Really?
Yeah, that Atlantic White Shark Conservancy took a few days ago.
Well,
days
if
or
there's,
so?
Yeah.
if there's no other stuff, to have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
After that, yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thanks, everybody.
I do promise that all of our 3 hours and 40 minutes.
No, some are longer.
Yeah, some are longer, some are shorter.
Okay.
I feel like someone's first meeting was like an hour long.
Yeah,
I feel like it's one of you two.
somebody got it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It wasn't me.
Sarah was supposed to drop this off today.
That's all right.
But doesn't give you a call every time it off.
Okay, yeah.
You were, yeah.
On it.
Thank you.
Yeah.